Once upon a time, crowds of people gathered on a hillside. Many of them had come, they've traveled a long distance. Most of them were not wealthy people, most of them were uneducated. But they all gathered for one purpose. They all gathered to hear a traveling preacher who was set to preach to them. And this preacher, he drew crowds the likes of which even the revivals of Whitefield and Wesley and Edwards never ever saw. They could not touch the legacy of this guy because he came to teach about a new kingdom that was about to dawn, a new way. And so they gathered to hear him, and he was captivating, he was spellbinding. They hung on every word that he spoke. And then he had to go and mess everything up by talking about money. Hate it when a preacher preaches about money, don't you? You see, in this series, we're looking at the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. He was that traveling preacher, and he really did teach to people while sitting on the side of a mountain. And in these teachings, he teaches us about every aspect of life. He shows us a way of living that will bring life to every part of us, so it'll bring life to all of us. And in most of these things, as we go through this series, most of these things will be like this. They'll kind of strike us as like, yeah, that's true. I bet if I could do that, if I could actually put that into practice in my life would be better, it would be fuller. Most of the things that Jesus will talk about throughout this series will be like, yeah, it's so true, it's just hard to apply. It's hard to live like that. But if I could put that into practice, my life would be better. For each of these weeks, that will be the case, except this week. This week, the week where we hear Jesus talking about money and possessions, this is the week where we hear Jesus and we think, I'm not so sure. This is the week, the only week in all the series where we can hear the truth of Jesus, and it's not just a matter of, man, that's hard to put into practice. It is actually a matter of, if I were to live that way, if I were to follow that way, I'm not sure my life would actually be better. And of course, this is in spite of the fact that for most of us, survey after survey says this, that if we talk about the pain points in our life, our financial health, our relationship with our money and our possessions, that is the biggest pain point in our lives, right? In our marriages, it's always number one or number two on the list, sources of conflict in our marriage. It's money and sex, and those things kind of teeter-totter back and forth, but it's always there. Or even look at this. Dartmouth University, they published this life change index scale. It's been around for a while. Maybe you've seen it. They catalog all the different events in our lives where we experience change, and they rate them based on how stressful they are. So it's a 100-point scale. Top of the list is death of a spouse, the most stressful change you can go through. And like I said, it's a long list, but I just showed you the top 10 here. You can look at these for a second. Just take a look and see the ratings that they gave. And I think as you look at this, you'd say, man, yeah, all those things, those are really stressful changes. But here's what I want you to notice. I want you to notice the thread of money, of finance, the role that money plays in each one of these life changes. And it's not just that money alone is the thing that makes it stressful. These things are hard in and of themselves, but you wonder why these ratings are so high. It's because it's a compounding thing. Not only are you losing a spouse, but you're dealing with the financial impact of all of that. And it's true of every single thing on this list. Our finances, our money, it impacts us profoundly and often very negatively. I'll show you this other piece of data. This is a little closer to home. The Federal Reserve Bank here in St. Louis published this article last April, and they looked, this is just through the end of 2019. Can only imagine what the pandemic has done to change this, but at the time, US household debt had reached a cumulative $14.15 trillion, right? I mean, trillion? Come on, you know what I'm talking about. $1 trillion. I mean, that's a lot of money. If you break it down in this chart, the numbers aren't here, but this is 2008. And then of course the Great Recession, where suddenly we were like, oh my gosh, we have to change our relationship with debt. And then here we are now, 14.15 trillion. You can see that our mortgages are just as high as they were in 2008. A growing sector of debt that we carry now here, car loans. In this growing sector here has gotten a lot bigger, student loans, educational loans. And all of that may be, explainable. We may understand why that is, but can we just acknowledge something? Debt is stressful. When you open your credit card statement this month, it doesn't matter how good your Christmas was or how much you believe in what you spent money on, you open up that credit card statement, your stomach turns over, doesn't it? You may even feel a wave of regret. Debt is stressful. No one opens up their credit card statement and starts dancing into jig, and they're like, woo, right? No one. Debt is stressful. And see, the reality is of our status quo right now as it relates to our finances is most of us, our finances are not adding to our lives. There's something we're contending with or taking a lot away. And you would think because of that, we'd be looking for a better way. And maybe some of us are, which is why there are still pyramid schemes and prosperity preachers and people are buying lottery tickets, and maybe that's why people actually fall for the emails that say, dear sir or madam, I have $1 million I'd like to give you, just send me 1,000. You've gotten those emails. Hopefully you haven't answered those emails, right? I mean, we're looking for a better way, but yet we're so resistant to following Jesus's way. And I'll tell you why. I'm convinced of this. Most of us believe everything else that Jesus teaches, we respect his teachings deeply, but most of us believe that if we actually took to heart what he was saying and we put it into practice as it relates to our money and possessions, we would be the worse for it. We might even picture the life of St. Francis of Assisi. Maybe if you don't know about his life, you know something kind of about this type of person. He lived in the 12th century, was born to a very wealthy family. His dad was a silk merchant when silk was more valuable than gold. And so he grew up like a prince. But then on the basis of his faith, he decided as a young man to renounce all of his wealth. And not just to live, without his dad's money, but to live in poverty. He went around as a beggar. But whenever he would see another beggar, he felt compelled to give them something. So even his tattered clothing. I mean, the son of a silk merchant wearing tattered clothing, when he saw another beggar, he would just feel compelled to give them something. And here's why. Here's what he said. He said, I think the great almsgiver, God himself, I think the great almsgiver would account it a theft in me did I not give that I wear unto one needing it more. In other words, if I see someone in need, God would call me a thief if I didn't take what I have, even though I hardly have anything, and give it to that person. Whether you know St. Francis' story or not, you know people who have dealt with their wealth in such a way on the basis of their faith. They've spurred their wealth, they live in extreme poverty, and in the back of our minds, I think that's our picture of what this means, to take Jesus seriously at his word. That's what's gonna happen to us. And I'm not here today to insult them, but I do wanna set the record straight on something. I want to clarify something, that people who on the conviction of faith choose that path, they are more following the way of John the Baptist than the way of Jesus. See, John the Baptist was the one who lived in the wilderness in a cave. John the Baptist, who came right before Jesus, a relative of Jesus, he was the one who wore clothes that were made of camel's hair. I don't even know what to picture when I think of that. I just know that it can't be comfortable and it certainly doesn't sound stylish, right? I mean, camel's hair clothes, that's what he wore. His diet consisted, and you paleo people are gonna love this. His diet consisted of bugs and honey. That was it, wild honey, not the factory farmed honey or whatever that is. It's like no GMO honey. That was his diet. And most of us think, oh my gosh, that's what it would be for us to take Jesus seriously. And I'm not here to knock John, because Jesus said that of all the people born of humans, that John the Baptist was one of the finest. But I do need to clarify something. Jesus did not come into the world and follow the ways of his relative John. Jesus didn't go the way of John. Jesus came to teach us a new way. And I hope today that you might be open to hearing Jesus's way for you as a better way, a life-giving way, even as it relates to your finances. So we're in the Sermon on the Mount. These are 3 chapters out of Matthew's Gospel, 5 through 7. We're looking at a short section here where Jesus starts to talk about money. He says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Let's say that again. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Here, where moths and vermin can destroy them and where thieves can break in and steal them. But instead, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. And then he says this, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Then he goes on and he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. He's talking about our perception, our perspective, especially as it relates to treasure. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your perception, your perspective is healthy, then your whole body will be full of light and life. But if your perception or your perspective is wrong, if it's sick, if it's diseased, then your whole body will be full of darkness and disease. If then the thing that's supposed to be light inside of you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Then he brings it back around and he says, hey, understand this. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve, you cannot worship, you cannot bow down to both God and money. Now, when Jesus says money here, he's using an Aramaic word. The word is mammon, M-A-M-M-O-N. That's how we spell it, mammon. And a lot has been said about mammon. Mammon as maybe a pagan god, the god of money. And so people look at this and they say, Jesus is saying you can't serve the true God and this false god. He's talking about idolatry here. That may be the case, although this whole thing built up around mammon as kind of a personified, rival god. I think that's really more the responsibility of John Milton, who came hundreds of years later. He wrote about mammon than Jesus. See, mammon was just an Aramaic word. Aramaic was the language that Jesus and his friends, Jewish people in the first century, spoke. And mammon literally means from accumulation. So you understand why it might be translated as money. Money is the thing that we get, from work. But I think it's kind of a mistranslation. See, I think Jesus is not saying, he's not warning us simply about money and possessions. He's warning us about something that plays into all that, but it's more specific. He's warning us about accumulation, about a desire to accumulate, to acquire more and more and more. See, if we go back to the beginning of this teaching, Jesus said this. He said, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. He's talking about accumulation. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, hey, all treasures, all money is bad, it's evil. Didn't say that. He didn't say anyone who has treasures, man, they're going to hell. Didn't say that. He didn't say you need to sell everything you have. He said that to one guy once, but I think that was kind of a particular thing. I don't think he applied that universally to everybody. He didn't say, go and follow the way of John the Baptist. In fact, Jesus got a lot of grief for not following the way of John the Baptist, because that's what religious people sort of looked like in his day. They called Jesus a glutton and a drunkard, not because he owned a lot of things, but because he frequently attended the parties of wealthy people and he engaged in lavish food and drink, and he got a reputation. See, as Jesus starts, he doesn't say, hey, money and possessions, they're bad, get rid of them. Instead, he warns us about accumulation, about storing up our treasures here on earth. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we'll acknowledge that accumulation, acquisitiveness, always wanting more and more, that's the real problem. I'm talking about rising debt levels when we already have more than enough. What is that about? Why do we do that to ourselves when debt is stressful? Why do we go for more and more? It's this desire to acquire more. It's accumulation. You think about all the new self-storage facilities that are popping up, I know, in our community and wherever you are too. I think, are you kidding me? Look how big our houses are, and our basements are full of stuff, and our garages, you can't even park a car in there. And then we need more storage. What is that about? It's about this tendency toward accumulation. I need more and more and more. Or obsession, our obsession about getting to the next rung, the next level, the next neighborhood, the next promotion, the next title, the next tier of automobile. Again, what is that about? It's not about money and possessions. It's this desire that a little bit more, that's gonna do something for me. That's the danger. That's the problem that Jesus is trying to warn us about. Paul picks up on this warning later, and he says this. He says, those who want to get rich, notice, not those who are rich, but those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money, not money, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith itself and pierced themselves. I love this. They've pierced themselves. They've done it to themselves. They've hurt themselves with many griefs. Notice it's people who are eager for money. It's the love of money. It's people who desire money. It's not having money. It's not the things themselves. It is this desire for accumulation. That's the problem. And I'll tell you, in my line of work, here's what I get to see. I get to see people of all different economic levels. You know, I know people who have a lot of money. I know people who were born into a lot of money. They didn't earn it themselves. They just were born into it. I know people who they got into a career because they loved it. They were good at it. They wanted to help people and they've made a lot of money. I know people who have no money. I know people who've never had money. I know people who are poor. Like I know people who live very lavish lives, whether wealthy or poor. I know people who live very, very modest lives, whether wealthy or poor. I know people in all different kinds of economic circumstances. And because of the uniqueness of my job, I also get to see behind the curtain to the deeper state of their being, of how that affects them. And here's what I can tell you, that how much money and possessions you have, it almost means nothing for your level of happiness or wholeness. I mean, there are people who are happy who have, people who don't have. I mean, it's just all over the map. But here's what I can tell you. Here's a conclusion that I will never, I'll battle you all day about this because it's unequivocal and it's true. I don't know a single person, I've never met a single person who loves money, who is eager to get rich, who getting rich is their life's focus. I don't know a single person like that who is genuinely happy or whole. I know people who have a lot. I don't know a single person whose life's desire is I need more and they've made that their basis for living who is actually happy no matter how much they have. And yet so many of us, from the time we're young, we think about a career that's what? It's gonna make us a lot of money. And you think about that and you go, if that's our desire, if that's our compass, no wonder we are so empty. Now, I want to be clear about something else. For me, one of my life goals has always been, and it still is, to be a good provider to my family. Anyone else feel that? You know, it's an important thing. I want to provide for the people who God has entrusted me, and that's a godly thing. But I know even in that godly desire, that can get out of hand pretty quickly, can't it? Especially in this culture, providing for your family can be like getting on an elevator that's going up and there is no top floor. Like, where do you get off? Like, it goes from needs to wants and more wants, and there's always someone who's doing it better. It is a dangerous game. And see, the danger isn't the provision itself, it is this desire, it's this accumulative mindset. And when you live with that sense of just, I need to gain a little bit more, I need to gain a little bit more, I need to gain a little bit more, no matter what you're doing with it, if that's your mindset, then here's the problem, you will never arrive. It is really like an elevator without a top floor. You never get to where you're going. And so no matter what you have, it doesn't satisfy. You never feel blessed. You never feel a sense of gratification because there's always more for you to get. And this is why Jesus says that storing up for yourselves treasures on earth is a trap. If that's your perspective, if that's your perception on life, that's a good life, then it's like your eyes going dark and everything in you will be dark. Your perception is diseased. It will disease your whole life. Or Paul says, if that's your desire, if that's your love, if that's your eagerness to get more and more, it is a trap. You will pierce yourselves with many griefs. See, I wonder if maybe today we're ready to realize that, okay, maybe our way of handling money and possessions is not the best way. It's not leading us to a whole life. And I wonder if maybe we're finally ready, setting aside the misunderstanding about maybe St. Francis or John the Baptist, maybe we're finally ready to listen to what Jesus is saying to us and to follow his way. I hope maybe you are. And I'm gonna try to make this as simple as I can, and I think it is pretty simple, that if we're gonna do finance Jesus' way, the first step is to give to God first. First thing, give to God first. Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. You have to make a choice. You see, if accumulation, acquisitiveness is the thing that is so dangerous for us, I need more, I need more, I need more, I'm storing up, then the only antidote for that is to do the opposite. Instead of storing up, I give away. See, generosity is the antidote, but not just generosity in any sense, generosity to God first. And that's true for a couple of reasons. The first reason is this reason right here. See, when I'm generous to God first, here's what I'm teaching myself. Here's what I'm teaching my heart. I'm reminding myself that more than money, I need Jesus. All right, Doug Moss talked about that last weekend. And I've just been saying that to myself. I probably said it 1,000 times to myself over the last week. Jesus, I need you. Jesus, I need you. More than money, I need Jesus. That's true when I have a lot, because I can start to trust in my bank account. I can start to trust in my possessions. And it's important for me to remember that before all of that stuff, what I need most in my life is Jesus. That is true when I'm broke, when my back is up against the wall, when I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills, and I'm looking at these statements and I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, and I'm feeling so overwhelmed and stressed out and I'm in debt. That's even more true that a little bit more money, that's not gonna solve my problems. Jesus can. And so more than a little bit more money, I need Jesus. When I give to God first, it's a reminder to me that more than money, I need Jesus. It's a way of inviting my heart to depend on him, to trust in him, to see him as my Lord and Master and the only one who can bail me out. I'll tell you what, for me in my journey, and I've said this before, even as a pastor for the first few years that I was a pastor, this was not something I was willing to do. Because I'm like, God, I'm giving you my life. I'm giving you my career. I could have made more money. I've taken on educational debt for you. I'm not gonna do this first. And I realized that in not being willing to do it this way, money and possessions, they were taking a greater hold in my life. And I kept looking to those things to solve my problems. The moment I started to give to God first and to realize that more than more money, I need Jesus, the more I started to see God doing miraculous things. And this is not prosperity gospel saying, God, I'm not rich still today, I do fine, but I started to see God come through for me. I started to see God provide for me. The scriptures say that God owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills, the gold is his, everything is his. And truly, when you put him first, he will provide for what you need. It's the story of my life over and over again. When you give to God first, you're reminding your heart where it needs to look first. But that's not all. It's not only about who is most important. Giving to God first also reminds you of what is most important. Generosity is the way that I reorient my desires away from earthly stuff that does not last, and I reorient my desires to things that will actually last forever. Which I don't know about you, when I hear Jesus say, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, I get that. When he says treasures in heaven, I'm like, I don't know that I get, how do you store up treasures in heaven, and what are treasures in heaven? And I'm not 100% sure, but here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that I know of two things, and these are the only two things I can think of right now, two things that will last forever. Jesus' kingdom, that's the first thing. His kingdom will stand forever. So we know that kingdoms will rise and fall, and economic systems will rise and fall, and political systems will rise and fall. Jesus' kingdom, his way, his reign will stand forever, which means, by the way, that it's a good thing we're doing this series, and we should get accustomed to his way, because sooner or later it's gonna be the only way that's left, and we better learn to like it. Jesus' kingdom will stand forever. That's one of the things that will stand forever. You know what else will last forever? People who receive Jesus as the king. Jesus' kingdom will last forever, and people who embrace Jesus as the king, they will last forever. Everything else rots. Even the things that we think of as assets, like our homes, yeah, people can make money on real estate, but it's a timing thing. We know that, right? You can make money on the stock market. You can make money on anything if you get the timing right. As a homeowner, here's what I can promise. This is what every homeowner knows if you live in your house long enough. It's rotting all the time, right? I mean, you are just trying to keep that thing together. You're trying to keep it dry. You're trying to keep the walls up. Stuff is just, you got to replace it. You got to fix it all the time. It's not a real investment. I mean, you're just investing more money in it all the time just to keep it up. Same thing with everything else. I mean, cars are not investments. There's not anything that you can invest on in this earth. I mean, maybe land, but who knows? If the seas rise, even that's gonna be underwater. So, I mean, what do you invest in this world that's even gonna last a little while? They're all diminishing investments. And yet generosity to God's work, what it reminds me of the things that will last forever, the things that are more important than a great lifestyle, than a comfortable life, advancing Jesus' kingdom because that's gonna last forever, and inviting people to receive Jesus as the king because that's the way people will last forever. I mean, do an assessment in your heart right now of all the things you treasure. What do you treasure more than people in your life? I mean, nothing. Your kids, your parents, your siblings, your closest friends. I mean, those are the people that you treasure. Those are your greatest treasures. You know it's true. And here's what else is true. There's only one thing you can take to heaven with you. And it's not your stuff. I mean, someone once said, and it's true, I've done a lot of funerals. I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer, right? And the pharaohs of Egypt, buried with all of their treasure so they could enjoy it in the afterlife. Those guys are dust and their stuff is still there. They didn't get to enjoy it. The only thing you can take to heaven with you are the people you love, right? And I think about that, why giving to God first. In the Christian church, we call this tithing, T-I-T-H-E, tithe, or tithing, T-I-T-H-I-N-G. I'm not the spelling bee champ. Tithing, it's a weird word. Tithing means just this: give to God first. You give God first. You give him your 10% off the top before anything else, because it's a way to remind yourself of who is the true Lord and Master. Who do you need most? Not more money. You need Jesus. And it's also a way that you invest in things that will last forever. I think about this church. This year, we celebrate 170 years in existence. And back in our cemetery, there are graves from almost that long ago. And I think about the lives of people who've existed here as a part of this church and all the things that they've done. And some of them amassed great wealth and some of them did great things. And here's what I can tell you, that no matter what they did, one of the greatest decisions any of those people made, one of the greatest decisions that we can make, is to invest in the kingdom of God, the expansion of the kingdom of God. Invest in the mission to invite more and more people into a relationship with Jesus, because that's the way they will last forever. And I think about this over 170 years, because of people who have made this a priority in their lives. There are hundreds of thousands, do the math, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who will now last forever. Because people gave to God first. They invested in things that will last forever. See, the first thing that Jesus says is to give to God first. And I know it's hard, and it took me a long time to figure this out, but the sooner you figure this out and you just do it, the quicker you'll see it makes sense. The second step is this: then you give the rest, right? You give to God first, then you give the rest of what you have the right amount of attention. And we all know that by over-focusing, being too focused on money and possessions, man, that's a trap. We've talked about that today. But not focusing enough on your money and possessions, that's also a way to grief, because even if you don't care about it, somebody does, and they're gonna come knocking on your door and they're gonna make your life difficult, right? If the first step is about generosity, the second step is about being a wise manager of everything that you have. And it's kind of this Goldilocks thing. You know, not too much, not too little, not too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft. It's right in the middle, figuring out how to give your possessions the right amount of your attention. Because here's a principle that I don't think hardly anyone knows, even though it's so biblical. It's this: your treasures have power to steer your heart. See, Jesus says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't reverse it. He doesn't say, hey, whatever you love, that's where your treasure goes. No. He says, wherever you put your treasure, your heart will follow. That means your treasures have the power to steer your heart. So why do you have to give some attention to your money and possessions? Why do you need to make a plan for those things? Because if you want your heart to be aligned with the things that you say you value most, then the best way to do that is to put your treasure there first. You put your treasure there, your heart will follow. Here's an easy example, and I know you've all experienced this. Sometimes I'm driving around and I'm stopped at a light and I look at the car ahead of me and I see on the back of the car a window sticker. It may say Westminster Academy or Whitfield or St. John's School, or it may say, Mizzou or St. Louis University, or it may say Ole Miss, or it may, not enough of them say University of Michigan, I've noticed. But there are those window stickers, and I know right away what I'm looking at, so do you. I'm looking at the car of a person who is putting an enormous amount of treasure into one of those institutions. And I want you to think about this for a second. This is a person who is paying probably more money than they're paying for anything else into one of these institutions. And they're doing that, month by month, year by year, they're putting all this treasure into one of these institutions. And suddenly something happens where it's not enough that they're just sending all their treasure to this institution, but suddenly they get struck by this idea of, oh my gosh, I want to put a window sticker on my car and to give this institution free advertising. Now, any of you who have a sticker on your car, is anyone giving you a discount for that? Is it like 10% off if you can prove, like the guy who fixes your roof, you put a yard sign? No! But what happened to you? I'll tell you what happened to you. After you started dumping all this treasure there, you started to love that institution. Your heart went after it. You put a sticker on your car and you wanted to tell the world about it, right? And you can think about this in every aspect of your life. Where you put your treasure, your heart is sure to follow. And so, if we want to strategically use our treasures to align our hearts to the things that we say we value, the things that we think are most important, then we've got to give it some attention. Not too much, not too little, just the right amount. And I'll tell you, I think a great resource is what I said at the beginning of the service. A great resource is Financial Peace University. This is a Dave Ramsey course, and it's not perfect, but I think it's pretty good. And we're offering it by Zoom. This is a great opportunity for you to figure out how to give your treasures the right amount of attention so that you can put them in the right places, so that your heart follows and your heart and your values are closely aligned. Here's what else it'll do for you in life. It'll help you figure out how to live with margin. See, here's the thing. Leverage in business, it is a powerful tool. That's where you strategically use debt to get to the next place. It's a powerful tool, but it's a tool that can easily get sideways. When you're employing leverage in business, you have to pay an enormous amount of attention to what you're doing to make it work to your advantage. It's a powerful business tool. It's a terrible personal financial tool because none of us really have the resources, the bandwidth. None of us really want to give our money that much of attention. It's not that helpful for us. So through this, you'll learn how to live with margin. And here's what margin does for you. It enables you to have a plan for your finances, but not to have to think about them so much. To not have to sweat every nickel that you spend because you've got a little bit of wiggle room. You've got freedom to move. And yes, you've got a plan and it's aligned, but you've also got room to breathe. See, if we're gonna do this Jesus' way, then we've got to find a way to give the rest of our treasures after we've given God first just the right amount of attention. And there are resources to help you do this. Now I know what makes this so hard, this kind of stuff, whether it's Dave Ramsey or something else, that so many of us, we don't get to make these decisions unilaterally, right? Most of us are sharing money with someone else, and we don't want to deal with this stuff because we don't want to fight. And I get it. Who's got time to fight all day? The people who got time to fight all day, they're all on Facebook anyway. Right? You know what I'm talking about, right? That's not us. We don't want to do that. We don't want to pick fights, and so we just go, you know what? Forget it. It's just too hard. And I understand, but here's what I can promise, that by having this fight in a strategic way, in a way that's actually gonna get you somewhere, by having this fight, you're saving yourself probably 10,000 fights down the road. Because if your values aren't aligned, if your hearts aren't aligned, then guess what? If you're living life with someone, you're bumping into each other all the time anyway. Why not have this fight in a constructive way to really figure out what do we value and where are we putting our treasures so that when you do that, when you have a common plan and you're living with some margin and you got some freedom, then suddenly your hearts are also aligned on this journey. And the people you're already doing life with, sharing resources with, suddenly you're not fighting each other. Your hearts are aligned. By having one big fight over this stuff, you could save yourself tens of thousands of fights in the future. See, finance is Jesus' way. It's simple. You give to God first. That's how you remind yourself that more than money, you need Jesus. And that's also how you remind yourself that there are things that are passing away and there are things that are lasting forever. I want to be sure that I'm investing in things that last forever. And then the second thing you do is you give the rest of your finances the right amount of attention. You don't let them take over your thoughts in your mind. That's not healthy. You don't ignore them, but you get a plan that enables you to steer your heart. You get a plan that enables you to live with margin. And yet here's what I know, that some of you are just half listening to all this right now. And you're not convinced. I know this because I used to be you. I was a pastor and I was you. And you're hearing this and you're still just not sure because there are all these other ways out there in the world and those ways, they look good. And you go I don't know though, that way looks better. And so for you, you're hearing this and you're just not sure that even if you followed this way perfectly to a T, you're not sure you would like your life more. You're not sure it would be a better way. And if that's you, here's what helped me, and here's what I just want to remind you of. That the one who is inviting you into this way, Jesus, he's not out to get anything from you. Instead, the one who's inviting you to trust his way, he's all about being generous to you. I mean, that's what this is about. He wants to be he wants to give you something in this. And I want you to remember that the one who's inviting you to live according to this way, he has already given his life for you. Before your heart ever beat, he was after your heart and he was trying to give you a way to last forever. And he did. Before you ever were, he gave his life for you. And before you ever were, he created this world where he spared no expense, he spared no amenity. I mean, this world is incredible. And the more you explore it, the more you'll see, oh my gosh, God, he was not cheap when he created this world. He created a world that is incredible and he entrusted it to us. And I'm not sure if we're doing a good job of that or not. I mean, there's argument about that, but here's what I know. He gave us this world. He put it into our hands because he's a generous God and he only wants to give. And not only did he give us the world, not only did Jesus give his life, but even now he's given us his spirit. A spirit of consolation and life and rebirth and newness and hope. He's given us his spirit. I just want you to know that the one who's inviting you into this way, whether you do it or not, he has already demonstrated that he's invested in you. He wants to give to you. He wants to give to you. He has given to you in so many ways. So I'm inviting you today to trust him. To believe that in following his way, he doesn't want to take anything from you. He does not want to deprive you of anything. True to form, he wants to give you something. Let me pray. God in heaven, I pray that today you would just lift the veil from our eyes, that you'd change our perception, our perspective on these things. That we'd begin to see things in alignment with the truth that you're a generous God who has given us so much. And in this teaching, you do not want to take anything from us, but you want to give to us. God, help our hearts believe this truth. Help us fight against our natural desire towards accumulation. And God, give us the courage to take these steps, to do it differently. And Lord, here's what I'm confident of. Here's what I know, that you'll bring greater life to us. But Lord, just right now in us, in the middle of our doubts, insert a question, insert a possibility, a hope, even a fleeting momentary belief that maybe things could be better if we followed your way. God, just insert that into our hearts and our minds right now. And then, Lord, show us the step you want us to take. I pray in Jesus. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Help us grow our community by liking this video and sharing it on social media if you found it helpful or inspiring. Now, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of the amazing content that we're pushing out all the time. We would love to hear from you. So lastly, comment below and tell us where you're streaming from and if there's something that we can do to help you continue your life journey. Thank you so much for joining us, and may God bless your week.